Thanks for coming. Bienvenidos. Muchas gracias. And thank you to Local 2. Really. Javier Bravo of Morena in Guanajuato, Mexico, is on a 4-city tour in the United States. He has just returned from Boston. He's here now, and then he will be going to San Diego and then to Los Angeles. And we are very grateful for his agreeing to do this. And what is he doing? Why is he here? Javier Bravo is a professor at the University of Guanajuato, in the city of Guanajuato in Mexico, and he teaches history and archaeology. He is also a militant with Morena and has been with Morena really since before it became a political party, since the year 2010. He will give a very broad explanation of who and what Morena is in its history. So after his presentation, then people are free to ask questions in English or Spanish. I think afterward, there will be 2 or 3 people who will be making some announcements and explaining some things about some struggles that are going on currently right now, about what Morena is up to in Northern California, and also about Liberation Road, our organization. Adelante. Oh, mira.
Okay, let's start.
Okay. So, Javier.
Thank you, Bruce, for your presentation. Thank you, all of you, for having me here. It's a pleasure and also a problem to me because of my English. So be patient, please, especially when you will giving me questions. If the question is too long, I usually miss the point because English is not my first language. So I apologize for that. Well, I would like to start speaking about what are we doing in Morena as a movement and in Morena as a political party. And what we are doing is based on a concept. As one of our professors say in Morena, we are trying to spread the news about a radical way of understanding political power. That radical understanding of political power consists in the idea that political power is right among us. Its venue is the people. And we can say that, well, I already knew that we have the power belongs to the people, but we are very, how can I say, accustomed to, in Mexico at least, to say that they are the powerful, the powers that be, for example, or the president, or the PRI, or the PAN, or those horrible rightist, corrupt parties, traditional parties for Mexico, they have the power. We are very used to do that. So we are trying to change our language and trying to use a new language that consists in which the very idea that the real venue of the political power is people. But the people is not everyone who belongs or lives in Mexico, because we don't think that the powers that be or the PRI or the PAN are part of the people. They are against the people. The people are like, as one Italian thinker used to say, the people is the excluded, the oppressed. So when I say people, I mean the political community, the excluded. So, but the power here is undetermined. It's just a potential power, a power that can be, but it is not yet. It's only when the political community participates in different activities such as economy or social movements that institutions take form, and the very simple institutions in the ancient times, prehistoric times, those are always already institutions. So any institution can be, should be in favor of the political community. That is a positive way of understanding power when our representatives, all our efforts and institutions, our participation as representatives enhances life. This is the circle, the virtuous circle of politics, A, B, C, A, right? But what about if people do things otherwise, not thinking, not doing for the political community, but for themselves? This is a negative way of doing it. This is also politics, but you know, the rightist one. This is the cycle of corruption. A, B, D, A. A, B, D, A. This cycle of corruption. So this is the radical idea of Enrique Dussel, is one of the professors. He participates in the Institute of Political Formation. I will talk about that later. Institute of Political Formation into Morena. So, Morena, as you may know, was born as a social movement around AMLO, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, our present president, has been candidate 3 times, and only the 3rd time he became a president. But it's not that suddenly, it's not that unexpected. We have a long trajectory of social movements, social struggles, and Morena is like the confluence of our history, a long history of social movements, indigenous resistance to conquest, for example, indigenous struggles and social movements for the water, for land, for social justice. That is why during his inauguration as a president, AMLO was expressing his gratitude to all our precursors, all our victims of repression, social movements of the past that made possible for him to become a president. So we are part of that. We are not separate from our own history. So this is when we, the people, are become subjects, not objects, but subjects, but not individual subjects, but intersubjected subjects. I mean, we are community, political community. We are community, always community. That is why we have a very clear idea about what corruption is in Morena. Because if you read, you review the recent history of Mexico, well, one could say that they don't know what corruption is. It's all corrupted. All the government, all the institutions in Mexico were corrupted. And yes, this is true. This is true. I mean, moreover, institutions could not be corrupt if the very people didn't allow them to be corrupt. So, in that sense, also the people was corrupted because allowed, permitted corruption in all our institutions. That thing that ashamed us is changing right now. I'm not saying that corruption in Mexico has ended and there's no more corruption since AMLO came into power. That's impossible. We can change the law right now, today, this week, this year, this period, but not the minds of millions of people that are used to do things not that correct. I mean, because I believe that my people in Mexico is not a corrupt people. They can do corrupt things. They can commit corrupt actions. But if I was thinking that they are corrupt, they are rotten, or something like that, would be no cause to fight, to struggle. Okay, so Morena now is government. And we also have the majority in our Congress, the lower chamber or diputados and the higher chamber of senators. We have the majority, and we started to bring to discussion a lot of initiatives, democratic initiatives, against corruption, for example, because it was normal that even the president of the Republic of Mexico was a corrupt person and nothing happened. At the beginning of his government, Peña Nieto received as a gift a residence, a big house, $7 million house at the beginning of his period, and nothing happened. He said, "Oh, that was not for me, that was for my wife." There's no problem. What? Yeah, the White House of Peña Nieto. It was an old scandal, but nothing happened. Why? Because constitutionally, he was defended. By law, it was impossible to sue our own president. Now that has changed. Now we have a new brand law that makes possible the president to be sued by corruption. And any official in the government can be sued by corruption. It's a hard crime. I don't know in terms of laws here in the United States, but it's not a crime that you can fight against it in liberty. You have to be in prison while the things are investigated. So it's a brand new law. It's a new reality. We are in process of construction of a new reality. That's very important. That is why it's very important to spread the news that things are changing right now. People's minds are changing right now, but that is a more difficult and long process. I saw you with your fork in your pocket. Okay. All right. So AMLO has his own trajectory. Yes, he's 68 man with a lot of experience in politics. Since he was very young, he was the director of the National Institute of Indigenous Issues in Mexico, in the national level. He was 22 or 24, and he has a very high responsibility. But all his life, he has been fighting together with indigenous peoples, with rural communities, against corruption, for land, for water, all the time. He has also been the governor of Mexico City. His period was bright. I mean, he did a lot of good things. Mistakes? Yes, of course. He's a human being. And also his period as a governor of Mexico City, or even his presidency right now could contain a lot of mistakes. That is correct. But he's the first president in our history in Mexico that can openly accept his own mistakes. He has been done this every day because, as you may know, every day, I mean, from Monday to Friday, he gives a press conference in front of all the press without any restriction for the first time in our lives. I didn't want to die before I could see a change. And yes, that is why I'm happy. Of course, I am aware that errors, mistakes, or even corruption can happen into my party. I'm a member, registered member of Morena. But the news is that every time we identify a corrupt member of Morena, a corrupt senator or diputado, we kick their asses off from Morena. So immediately, I mean, there is a process, legal process to, expel them from our organization. It's very important for the people, for the political community to be sure that we are not going to allow corruption. It's not permitted anymore. Because the law, the law can be used only when there is a denounce, when it's a very an openly committed crime or act of corruption. But corruption begins not when I steal something, not when I betray somebody. Corruption begins here, the very moment I conceive for myself that I can do that I can commit a corrupt action if nobody sees me. The problem is to change our minds and make impossible for me, even if nobody is looking to me or at me. To me? At me. Sorry. I will not do that because it's wrong. Not because it's watching or not watching me. Because it's wrong. I know that it's wrong. So it's very important what we are doing in terms of political education. I will talk about that later, right? Because once we know this dynamics, this is I did this in Boston. I was 2 days ago in Boston, a presentation. I had my PowerPoint, but we had no projector there, so I improvised this. Okay, but it's useful today as well. Okay, so once you understand this dynamics, that ethics and political ethics is like is not like a religious or mystical or perpetual monolith to adore, to worship. No, it's a dynamic process because everything that happens with us humans is a process, it's a historical process, it's determined by history, by time and place and society and culture, right? So this is a process, dynamic process. If we understand this dynamic of virtuous political action, that all my acts as a representative, I execute them, all those acts, because the political community gave me a temporary delegate power to work for them, to do positive things for the political community. Okay? So it's a temporary and delegate political power because the people is trusting me for a short period of time. But the political community must be educated, understand things like this. This is political philosophy. Okay? But don't tell anyone about that. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that it is the very core of ethics, of political philosophy. It doesn't matter. Just people have to understand that this is important to have these concepts very clear. In the empirical field, every day, that it's wrong to betray, to lie, to steal something. That is why AMLO, in very simple words, says this every day. He says, I have 3 principles in my political activity. No mentir, no robar, no traicionar. Not to lie, not to steal, not to betray the people, not to betray the political community, because we are trusting him. I delegate temporary political power in order to do something good for the political community, for the excluded, because for decades we have been robbed. For decades we have been betrayed. For decades we have been in Mexico, all of that. We have been, yeah. Okay, yeah. I forgot the word in English. That's a problem. All right, so we in Morena have decided, in the National Congress of Morena, decided that 50% of the income of Morena as a political party, because by constitution, every political party in Mexico receives money. And the amount of money depends on the vote. So, in this period, Morena, a lot of money, okay? But first, we have an initiative to lower the income of political parties to less than a 50%. They, the PRI and the PAN, are mad. They hate us. Because we want to cut to the middle of what it is now, their income, but also ours. You make a law for everyone, not just for one political party. One law for one political party is absurd, right? You create laws for everyone. I mean, like the rules in a game, in this political game, new rules. They, of course, are against that initiative, but we have the majority. Even without negotiating with other small parties, we can adopt that law, make it real, and make it happen. That is a good news, okay? Well, but the amount of money that Morena receives is going to be dedicated to political formation. No other party does that. We decided that it's very important for the people to educate themselves in political terms in order to do the right thing all the time, not sporadically, but all the time. That is a new reality in Mexico. So, Morena is like any other political party, part of the Mexican state, because it's all regulated by our constitution. It's part of the political structure in Mexico, but we are changing things in the national level, changing some parts of our constitution. It's very important for us to make sure that the next presidential election in 2024 is not going to happen what just happened in Brazil. Lula, the best president in the history of Brazil, is in jail. But the problem is that the President, how is his name? Bolsonaro. Bolsonaro. People voted him. People voted right. Even people who came out from misery, from poverty, thanks to the government of Lula, they voted right. That is a result of, the lack of political education. So you can create a school and educate yourself without using fancy words. You don't have to say political philosophy, ethics. No. You can use the same words that use people, believers, for example. You can use your Bible. I was raised as a Catholic child in Mexico, as many others in Mexico. So using the Catholic Bible, I can find the words, the concepts, the ideas, the examples of this kind of virtuous politics. We have a great example in our history. Theology of liberation in Latin America is very important for us. Theology of liberation was the stake of one small part of Catholic Church for the poor, for the excluded, for the oppressed, for the indigenous peoples conquered and, enslaved for centuries. That is the good part of Catholic Church, because the majority is not that good. I can say it because I was raised as a Catholic. I have seen that structure of power from the inside. Even now, pedophilia and the exclusion of the women from the very hierarchy of Catholic Church is a reality. And they are not changing that reality. But I would say, thank you, feminists, because you are struggling, even within the Catholic Church, to open the space to participation of women in Catholic Church. That is very good. And we are very following their steps of all those cases of pedophilia in Catholic Church, and not only in Catholic Church, but mainly in Catholic Church, because it's very important, very influent in my country, in Mexico. So things are going to change, but not from above, maybe. We hope that from below. From below. I'm so sorry. Okay, so look, we have created the Institute of Political Formation in Morena, but how is it working? It's working in 3 levels. It's going to work in 3 levels. One general level, everyone can receive or be educated or get educated or self-educated in political philosophy. Everyone. We have circles of studies, circles of political formation all over the country in Mexico. Thousands and thousands of circles of political formation right now in Mexico. We are working almost every day, but mainly Fridays and Saturdays. And we are not even using public funds. So we have the right to use 50% of our billions of pesos that we have the right to use, because constitutionally we have permission to use it. But we are not using them yet. But they are already working, thousands and thousands of circles of political formation, simultaneously, all over the country. And we are talking about things like this. But this is an abstract thing. yeah, like theoretical. This is full of examples of our own history in Mexico, of struggles of the people for freedom, for social justice, against corruption, against racism, against misogyny, and so on and so on. A lot of examples. Not only our independence revolution, not only our Mexican revolution of 1910, 1917, not only another big and known, very well-known struggles like the student movement of 1968, for example. Not only. Even there are hundreds, even right now, hundreds of social struggles for water, social conflicts. And they seem to be invisible. But we need to read news otherwise, in a new way, and looking for those signs of political activity, because people are actually very well politicized. They are not passive. We have repeated too many times that in Mexico we are too tolerant to corruption, that we are passive, we are not politicized. No, I would say, how can you explain that AMLO received more than 30 million votes? That is because people are politicized. We are only 3 million militants. I mean, registered members of Morena. Only 3 million in the whole country, Mexico. But not 30, and more than 33 million voted AMLO. Even people, that means that even people that used to vote right for the PAN or PRI and the other corrupt traditional political parties in Mexico, this time voted left, voted AMLO. Because voting left is voting right. Right? Right. That's right. Yeah, and voting right is wrong. So right is wrong. And yeah, and left is right. Okay. English language. That's why I prefer Russian. I'm more fluent in Russian than in English. That's why. I cannot switch right now, right here. Okay, so this is the first level of the structure of political formation in Mexico. Anyone can come to our circles of political formation. Doors are open. All the people is invited to visit and to participate in the circles of political formation. We are reading beautiful texts. We are reading mainly young people. Of course, there are people like me and even older, but the majority is young people. They are reading philosophy. They are reading our some articles about our indigenous peoples, their struggles, their dignity, their worldview. Beautiful things we are reading. We are talking about that. Is that so inspiring? So inspiring. It's beautiful. It's happening. Right now in Mexico, in my country, is happening a real revolution, Pacific revolution, because we are changing things deeply. I mean, we are not revolutionaries in the sense that we used to say revolution 50 years ago or 100 years ago. No, I wouldn't say that. You know the word coffee. You know coffee, right? Well, we are decaf. We are decaf, yeah. But what means really, when I say we're not coffee, we're decaf, I am saying that we have 3 principles here in this dynamics of political philosophy, 3 principles of ethics, of political action, of political praxis. We are using that word without it was forgotten. Praxis means a practice that changes things for good, to the political community, right? So 3 principles. One of them is the material principle, life. Life. The political community wants to live. And to live for us in our movement, to live is to live well. If you don't live well, you are just surviving. We want life for all the political community. That is radical. So, those are the same words. We are using simple language, but the content of that language is changing. Okay? So the first principle is the material principle, life. People, political community want to live well. For all those forms of participation in economics, in politics, in social movements, and so on, we need agreement. Using a common language, we can talk to each other as equals. As equals, because if we do not talk to each other as equals, this is not a dialogue. This is a speech of domination. First of all, we have to look to each other as equals. If not, try to change your mind, because what have been harming the peoples of the world for millennia is the speech and the acts of power, acts of aggression. There's a small book by Noam Chomsky, Acts of Aggression. I recommend you to read that. Well, consensus. It is called consensus. Here, consensus. Okay. The first one is the material principle, life. The second is consensus. This is number 2. 1, 2. And the third one is factibility. Factibility. You have to come to an agreement and by consensus ask you to be our representative. For a short period, we will be watching you, following your steps. You have to work for us in this cycle, A, B, C, A, B, C, A, B, C. Yeah, the positive, the virtuous politics. The virtuous politics. So, but to do that, you have to do possible things. Possible things, because if I promise happiness today for everyone, well, that could be understood as demagogy. Okay, but it is good as an utopia, as a light to walk in a dark space, in a dark road. The utopia, the ideas and the ideals enlighten you and can help you to walk. Okay? And do possible things also means that you have to be pragmatic with consensus and enhancing life. Otherwise, you could be priista or panista in Mexico, which means corrupt. Because being just pragmatic means that, well, I can do anything because I am a good political operator. I am a good political, like a lizard or a fox, very clever, I can do things. But without permission, without consensus. And not for the life of the political community, but for myself. And that is the other cycle of political activity, of political action. That is A, B, D, A, B, D, A. This is the cycle of corruption. I am doing the possible. That is one of the principles of political action, or the political activity, or the ethics, factibility, do feasible things. But we must not allow politicians to do these things without consensus in political and enhancing life. I mean, the three principles are important, not just one, not two, the three. These guys, typically in Mexico, PAN, PRI, are doing this without consensus, without permission. They are not enhancing life of political community. They have been for decades doing the opposite, right? The opposite. Well, in the second level, in our circles of political formation, in the Institute of Political Formation, after you finished the courses and seminars and workshops of basic political formation, if you are a militant, if you are a registered member of the party, Morena, you can then go to the next step, the next level of political formation. And there we have several contents. Let me read it because it's going to be faster than if I try to remember every point. Political formation. Okay. Sorry. Okay, 3 levels. The first level is ethics and political philosophy. Logic and argumentation is very important for our young people to reason logically and to can construct, create arguments for the debate. Very important. Besides the content of the discussion, to think with logic is very important, and to construct adequate arguments for debate. Okay, that's why ethics and political philosophy. Second, logic and argumentation, and history of Mexico. 3 groups of contents in the first level: general political formation for all the people. The second level for militants: basic documents. That is, we have 3 basic documents in Morena. The basic principles is a document called Principios Básicos, basic principles. Our statute and the plan of action. 3 basic documents. Militants all must know well our basic documents. Our basic documents is kind of elementary. And the third level of political formation is for candidates or people who want to become a candidate in a year of elections. Okay, there's a third level. We have to learn how to redact, how to create an electoral platform. We have to learn how to create an initiative, for example. That is a matter of a very technical work. Very technical. Lawyers and people like those very expert in those issues will be educating our candidates. So these are the 3 levels of political formation so far. It can be changed in time, but now it's very important for us to spread the news. Like anyone can come to our circles of political formation and have a good discussion and create community, because that's where it could be very productive even for panistas or priistas to think about this. Yeah, maybe they are corrupt because they didn't know that there is an option in life. You can do thinks otherwise. As a normal person, and not lying, not betraying, not stealing, not robbing the people. Seems that simple, but they are, different brain or something works differently. But it can be changed. There is hope even for them. Even for them, there is hope. Well, I'm not too optimist. Actually, I'm not an optimist. I have hope. Because if I say that I am optimist, then I do nothing. Because, well, it's not that bad. I am optimist. I am an optimist. There's corruption in Mexico. PRI and PAN are rotten, are the worst thing in our lives, in our history, especially in 20th century. But it's not that bad. I'm alive. I can come here, do things. I have time for family, for happiness, for going to movies. It's not that bad. I am an optimist. I don't like to be an optimist because then I do nothing. I have no commitment with the people. But when I have hope, when I can see the dynamics of corruption, A, B, D, A, B, D, A, this is the dynamics of corruption, then I have hope. I can see the light. I can see the exit of this situation. And then I have commitment and do things to change the reality. And the reality is changing right now. It's not about to change in the future, the near future or the far future. It is changing right now. Since we are thinking and reading and looking to the reality with renewed eyes, with new eyeglasses. That is the problem. They didn't have any eyeglasses. They were blind. But once you understand this, once you have read Dussel or Gramsci or some other authors, you cannot be the same person. You have not the right to remain the same person that you were. Tolerant to corruption, tolerant to violence, and so on and so on. You cannot be. Otherwise, if you remain the same person, tolerant to corruption, that means that you are learning nothing. You are not understanding the very core of politics. This is politics. The other one, this one is anti-politics. This is necro-politics. Yes, necro. Necro. Because they do not create life. They do not enhance life. They create death. Sorry. They rob. They betray the political community. That is necro death. Politics that kills the community, kills people. It's horrible. I get mad, get angry. I'm about to get 5 more minutes, okay, 10 more minutes. So, what we are working on, very hard. I am a professor of the University of Guanajuato, but Fridays after work, I go home, I stay with my little son, he's 11, we do the homework, I feed him, and then I go to the circle of political formation. Nobody is paying me, nobody is paying us. We do it because it's important for my country, for my people, to change things. Otherwise, I told you, I didn't want to die and not to see a new leftist government in Mexico. Well, I'm happy because I'm here, still alive, and things are changing in my country. But also, I don't want to die and tell my boy that there is corruption in Mexico, apparently, and all that they created or destroyed, and I did nothing. I would be ashamed to die having done nothing. But I am doing things. I am happy. I have hope. That is why I am not an optimist. I have hope. And I have hope means that I have commitment. I sacrifice time of my family with their permission, of course, because there is consensus. My wife Claudia, my son Santi, my son Adrian, they know that I am there fighting all the time. They know my speech. Oh, okay. But I need to do that. I need to do that. That. Oh, I mix words with Russian. Okay, so I'm about to finish. Well, of course, I would like AMLO, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, to come to our circles of political formation and read the same things we read because he needs that. Yes. Yes. He has a lot of experience. He's a political man all the time. He's thinking on politics all the time. You know that he wakes up at 5 o'clock, at 6 o'clock. He's already working with the team of security, police, the army, the navy, from 6 to 7. At 7 o'clock, every morning, he goes out, stays in front of the press, and gives a press conference every day. He's a machine, the political working machine all the time, always. Well, and he has a very sharp political intuition, very sharp political intuition. I mean, many things that I can explain theoretically in the classroom, in the Universidad de Guanajuato. He does that. He has he does not hesitate that politics is this, A, B, C, A, B, C, A. He almost does no mistakes in that sense. Empirically, he can fail, he can do things that are mistaken, maybe. But in general, he's here all the time. Intuitionally, yes, maybe. But he has written 16 books about history, about politics, about corruption. So he actually can continue being a president. I gave him permission not to come to our circles of political formation because he's a good president, very good president. But when he finishes, I will ask him to come because we need to understand and to explain people, not just by our acts, but also by using a different language to understand, to explain the world, the reality, and to talk to each other in a different language. But that is very important. That new language, critical language, leftist, definitely, leftist language is being used every time rightist forces of corruption in Mexico attack AMLO. I'm giving you just an example. He can attack every one of us from the people, right? But they attack AMLO. Legions of people in Mexico respond with their cell phones and computers to the lies, to the disinformation, all the time, every second. They do not rest. We are millions. We are millions. So the digital space is a battle space right now in Mexico. There's a battle, constant battle. They attack, and our people respond with a high level of energy and high level of quality of information. They attack with lies, with disinformation, and our young people respond with documents. They go to the depths of cyberspace and they find photographs, historical documents, books, everything, and respond all the time to every attack. That is beautiful. It's a beautiful way to battle, to struggle every time. So young people is the future. They are clean. They have no trajectory of belonging to corrupt traditional parties in Mexico as PRD, PRI, PAN, and so on and so on. They are clean. And many of them are in Morena with a high level of commitment. I don't have to persuade them about these things. They are completely convinced. I mean, they are a new kind of people in Mexico. That's why Andrés Manuel López Obrador and we are trying to push them forward. We are going to have elections in Mexico in 2021, intermediate, and then presidentials in 2024. We are trying to push forward young people, clean people, because right now in Morena, in the government, and in our majority in Congress, we have people from everywhere, because they are what we had. Those were our human resources. There are people from PRD, PAN, PRI. You know, I am a little bit ashamed, but it was the reality. We need to do things, and we are doing with those people. It's okay. But now, the next wave in 2021, and the other wave will be a tsunami, I hope. I don't know, but I hope. Tsunami of clean people, mostly young people with political formation. Whoa. The future is very, very inspiring. We are creating the future. We are creating new conditions for the development of our people, our country in a new way. So, yes, we can change laws right now and create new institutions right now, but to change the mentality of the people takes more time than that, more time. But we are doing fundamental work. Political formation is very, very important to us. I was prepared for speaking about some changes, concrete changes that we have made. I say we, but I have changed nothing because I'm not part of the government. I'm not part of our Congress. I'm just a base militant. I'm a professor at the University of Guanajuato, but I feel myself part of this movement, of this wave. Leftist, clean wave, fresh wave with a new language, political language. So I am proud of being part of this movement. And I want my people in Mexico, in Morena, to look with new eyes to all these forms of political participation of our political community. That means that not only to look at ourselves as endogamy or narcissism. No, we have to look to the social movements, especially movements of our originary peoples, our indigenous peoples in Mexico. And second, to the feminist movement in Mexico. Those are the most powerful movements in my country. First, indigenous movements in Mexico are fighting for basic things, a normal life, for land, for water, for dignity, for being recognized as human beings. So simple, but so complicated. They have been fighting for that for centuries, 5 centuries. Still fighting. Why? Because of the lack of social justice, because of the lack of brotherhood. I mean, brotherhood is a prostituted word, because even the most aggressive governments in the world, can you imagine one very aggressive government in the world? Well, even they speak about humanism. They, more than others, speak about humanism, peace, love. No. Supposedly humanistic principles. At the same time that they are invading peoples, doing the war, exterminating peoples, the work for researchers. So, well, I'm going to stop here because just want to say that our indigenous peoples in Mexico are fighting for simple things that are synonym of life in terms of dignity, in terms of satisfaction of basic needs, in terms of respect. They want to dialogue. They want dialogue, not anymore a speech of domination. Not anymore. Feminist movements, what they want? What do they want? They want
Quality.
igualdad, equality, respect to the women's human rights. That's it. That means no to misogyny, not to machismo, not to violence, not to apparently simple things, but it's so hard to convince the privileged macho to stop his violence. Very difficult. We are trying to do that. I will do an advertisement. I have a group in Guanajuato, a group of men. We are working on new masculinities. What does it mean? That means that in a country, plenty of machismo, misogyny, we are working with other men to explain them that there are several ways to be a man. Those ways to be a man are non-violent. You can be a man in different ways, non-violent ways, because they don't see a choice. We were educated, myself, I was educated as a small Catholic boy, and they taught me that men don't cry. Men can be tender. Men should not wash dishes. Men, bullshit. Where it's very difficult to persuade men that this privilege is oppression for others. My privilege is your oppression. So simple, right? But it's very difficult to internalize that idea. We are working very hard on that. That is beside the circles of political formation. One other of my activities is to work with men in new masculinity. Well, I have to do that because I have hope, I have commitment, but I will try to do this within Morena, within the circles of political formation, because it's very political. That is a very political task, to change the misogynist minds of my fellow men in Mexico. Very difficult. Thank you. Any question?
Trying to understand,
Yes.
I haven't read a lot about, Mexico and
Okay.
the economic system and everything, but, you have life, consensus, and flexibility up there. And, and I understand, you open the door to politically educate the community, around your philosophy and your party and all of that. But, under life, you said everyone, you want everyone to live well. So I was just wondering what other things you're working on, or one program that you're working on to move the people in that direction. I know, jobs, income, it's really,
Okay.
it's tough.
Yes. There are several programs, new programs in the government of Mexico right now to create some conditions of equality. Of course, it can not be a perfect government or perfect social policy or perfect president, but we have now a universal system of pension for older people. Okay. It already existed. But it was in some amount of money. Now it has been doubled. It's double right now. There is a brand new scholarship for all young people in basic school, primaria, secundaria, universal. It's a process. I mean, right now, its coverage is 80 or 85%, but it's a process. They are continuing to making the list, the whole national list, and also, but for young people studying in public university, a universal scholarship.
That's great.
It's the first time in our history. Another thing is a social program called Sembrando Vida, planting life. That means that it's like, well, of course, the distance in time and culture is important, but it's like a Mexican New Deal. It's like a Mexican New Deal because hundreds of thousands of people are now planting trees and receiving a salary that we pretend to become permanent. I mean, if I plant a tree, I have to take care of this tree. It's not just a matter of planting and go forward and never come back. You have to follow, to monitor or what you have been doing in order to be productive someday. So they're receiving a salary. About this specific program, Central American immigrants in Mexico are invited to participate, to stay in Mexico with work visas and a job, doing things like planting trees and some other programs. Building roads for communities incommunicated for centuries, and now they are building their own roads that communicate a main highway, for example, to their communities. For the first time, they are participating. I mean, the government puts the building materials, and they put the workforce. And the lack of corruption, because if the federal government gives the money to local governments, as it used to be, the money never achieves the recipients. Okay, because of the corruption. And many other, I mean, they are not perfect, but they are changing
You
things
started.
from below.
Yeah.
Changing things from below. At the same time, there have been some cuts in the budget that are affecting artists or researchers like myself. We have some cuts. But why? Where those money, that money or those money, that money for social programs is coming from the, we closed the pipes of corruption. We closed the pipes of corruption. We are doing some cuts. I can wait. I, as a professor, as a researcher, can wait for my scholarship, for my some bonus or something. I can wait because I understand that we have to do feasible things, possible things.
Right, right.
And all these years, decades of corruption mean that many people had nothing at all. So it's very important for those people to receive at least something, to eat normally, finally. So I can wait, I will wait, because I have solidarity. Yes, sir.
I wonder if you could explain a bit more about the political education program that you were talking about. And how has this actually been executed?
Okay. Well, circles of political formation are actually working very intensively. Where in houses, in homes, in some spaces that somebody donates us for a while for this activity, and everywhere, in schools, in squares, in parks, it's happening right now. The contents are, well, this is a good question because it all began with some courses, online courses. A series of videos in YouTube were made by some professors such as Enrique Dussel and others. Those are professors at the UNAM, several universities in Mexico, but also they are militants, they are activists, and they are people with a high level of commitment. So they created those courses, online courses, and we could then be evaluated and receive a certification. Well, it was 3 years ago, 4 years ago. Now, the Institute of Political Formation didn't exist then. Now it exists. We are recovering all those materials and considering them part of our institute. This is the basis. The first course was political formation, ethics and political formation, because it's the ABC for everything. For everything, even for being a father, even for being a professor at the university, even for do anything. We have to have ethics, what we are working for. So it's very important, the content. Also, we have courses of Mexico history, courses of logic and argumentation, but also very important is about the religiosity of my people. In Mexico, people are very, very religious. They are believers. That is fine. That is very good because people need hope. In recent decades, leftists in Mexico were Marxists and Leninists. That meant then that they were atheists. Sorry, atheists. That's, yeah, it's very difficult, that word. But that is one of the reasons why they never connected with our indigenous peoples because their attitude of superiority in front and against and above our indigenous peoples. We don't think like that anymore. We are more humble. We are being serious when we say that we need to dialogue. If you come with the attitude of superiority, this is not a dialogue. This is, again, a speech of power. We understand, now we understand it. They didn't understand that. That is why their understanding of socialism or Marxism or Leninism was only for them. Only for them. But all millions of indigenous peoples in Mexico were like, you know, don't touch my religion. Don't, because you're touching my heart. Okay, so we are even working on that. Especially with Catholicism. Especially with the faith on La Virgen de Guadalupe. Very important for my Mexican people. Very important. We are reading the texts about Maria Guadalupe, the original text, 16th century text. We are reading it in a new way. In a new way. I can speak about that another time. Not now because it's too late. Yes. You are the moderator.
Okay. My name is Luis Rivera, and my question is very simple. I mean, when I heard that Juntos Haremos Historia, which means together we'll make history, that was the beginning of Morena and AMLO. I jumped right away. Jumped right away because I think it was needed and it was the time. My question is, since the Bracero movement, since the Bracero people, the United States of America, until nowadays, people that get deported, especially Mexican people that get deported to Mexico, it gets left alone. With all those programs that is pretty much to people that live in Mexico, Eastern Mexico, and Western Mexico, what Morena is doing to all deportees people, especially family and parents people that get deported. And what is the government doing? So far, all they do is give them a ticket and go home.
Yes.
All right. My question is, what Morena is doing as a political party in this country, and what AMLO is actually doing? Who's doing something about it?
Yes. Okay. What they are doing is to create like a belt. They in the government call that a belt of development in the northern border of Mexico. I mean, within our territory in Mexico. That development border means that they pay better salaries than in the rest of Mexico. And at the same time, they are paying less taxes than in the rest of Mexico. So if people come to Mexico from the United States, they have the option. I mean, it's not a perfect option, but it's an option. It didn't exist before, to stay there and have some income that will be better than in my state, Guanajuato, or southern states, and to pay less taxes. Also, in the south border, is doing more or less the same, inviting to participate in social programs. If they don't have a job, you are not hired by someone, the government can hire you for a time. They're creating universities, 100 public universities, brand new, all over the country, for people with no money. For example, they just deported people or immigrants from South America, or the poorest people in Mexico. Actually, we don't say poor in Morena, we say impoverished. Because when we say poor, we are normalizing poverty. If I say I am poor, it's normal. I am. It's part of my being. Poor. No. If I'm referring to myself, I use the word poor, I say impoverished. Impoverished. It's not normal to be poor. So, I would like things to be better than they are, but something is changing. I would invite you to visit the page of the web page of the government of Mexico, where all the social programs are in one site, and you can enter and visit and get to know what is their content. So what else? I just don't remember the whole bunch of social programs, but what AMLO said is that his dream and the utopia, the dream is very important, is like the light that helps us to walk and go. His dream is to make immigration from Mexico to here, for example, an option, because now it is not an option. It's a necessity. Mexican economy has been expelling our peoples to here mainly, but anywhere far away from their original places of residence. That is awful. That is monstrous. It is beginning to change. So that is all I think. So, okay. Yes, sir.
I have two questions. My first one is regarding the relationship of the Zapatista indigenous movement and the Morena government, because I know that developing tourism seems to be one of the programs being pushed by the Morena government, and there seems to be some conflict there. And my second question is regarding the policy towards immigrants from Central America and the pressure from the Trump administration on Mexico, and how is that being dealt with?
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
The Zapatistas are our masters in the sense that they are our teachers. They are not our enemies. So they have been saying that they don't believe in elections, they don't believe in modern, individualistic, capitalist democracy. They don't believe in that because they have been harmed for centuries by that kind of democracy, so-called democracy. For them, it's not democracy, all right? So their principles of political action are the same than ours. But I believe that they are cleaner than we are because we have members of Morena that were part of the PRI, the PAN, PRD, and other parties. And they are acting very well, sometimes not very consistently. We have been betrayed by some diputados or senators when we voted a very critical initiatives of law and they voted against that. It happens. It will be happening always because it's difficult to create an absolute unity of thought, an absolute unity of beliefs and actions. It's very difficult, almost impossible. In terms of activity, that's impossible. So, but they are our teachers in that sense. They continue to be very critical. They do a lot of criticisms about us, and that is correct. We need that. We actually need that because they are the most consistent critics of modern politics. We need that critique. It's very important. Not only from the Zapatistas, but in general from indigenous people, but the Zapatistas are the most mediatic. They are present all the time in the media, and they have a global voice. People hear what they are speaking about. But we share their principles. We share their principles, but Zapatistas, as every social movement in the world, they have culturally determined aims, while a government, a federal government, has the pretension to be universal. Universal in terms of Mexico. Okay? That is why I disagree with the term Ejército Zapatista de Liberación Nacional. Their principles, their structure, and what they are proposing is impossible in the scale of the whole Mexico, because they practice the direct democracy. They participate directly in the decisions of their communities, the caracoles. That is right in that scale of participation. They are our teachers. But when they say nacional, that is impossible. We need representatives. We need diputados, senators, and so on and so on. Because otherwise it's impossible for 130 million inhabitants in Mexico to participate directly in every decision. In empirical terms, it's impossible. That is why I look at that critically also. And the second
Was regarding the treatment of refugees.
yes. Yeah, it's a very complicated situation because as a result of the negotiations, our critics say that there was no negotiation. Donald Trump decided you have to obey. Yes, maybe yes, but not at all. Not at all. I mean, the National Guard was created by a brand new law. We didn't have a national army. We had the army and the police, federal police and local police organizations. Very corrupt. Very, very corrupt. Now we have the National Guard. I'm not saying that corruption disappeared from the map. No. What I'm saying is that now it's very difficult for those members of the police or the army that participated in mafia groups that kidnapped Central American immigrants, that kidnapped and prostituted Central American women immigrants, or kidnapped children for organs, Mafia, horrible. It wasn't just the drug cartels. They extended their influence into a lot of activities. Drug cartels, in that sense, in that wide sense, is a capitalist enterprise. It's capitalism. They are exploiting natural resources, they are exploiting people the same way the capitalism does. They use natural resources, human resources, and then discard them as debris, garbage. Terrible. So we are dismantling all those mafias in the south border with the help of National Guard. About the detention camps in the south border, they already existed. They existed not only along the south border, they existed even in the state of Guanajuato. In San Miguel de Allende, not far from where I live, there is the Instituto Nacional de Migración. They had not a camp, it was a room with a lot of Central American immigrants since, 20 years or more. What is happening right now, a new phenomenon, is that the National Guard is stopping them and asking for documents because before this agreement, what we are talking about, a lot of people from Central America came into my country, and we didn't know who they were, and we didn't care. Now, they are stopping and asking for documents, for identification. First of all, because the government is offering them a job, the possibility of staying in Mexico with a job, with a work visa, and so on. They don't want to do that. I mean, just so far, some 2,000 Central American citizens accepted the offer and stayed in Mexico for working for a while. 2,000. But there are hundreds of thousands coming to Mexico. So, but there is a possibility, a new possibility. I think it's a good news that those mafias are disappearing. Very good news, because lots of people from Central America just disappeared. They were killed, they are part of the mafia, or they are just not people, but organs for trade. Horrible, monstrous that is disappearing. That is why I actually do accept the criticism about the imposition for our government from, let's say, your government. But otherwise, it's not only negative. There is some positive, because we cannot deny that we are not part of the center. We are part of the periphery. We are in Mexico. Mexico is a peripheral country. It's not part of the center. If we understand that, we can try to find some other smart, more or less intelligent ways of negotiating to fight back. But it's too complicated.
Professor Bravo, I have two questions.
Yes.
In terms of the circles of political formation, I've recently been in northern Mexico and I witnessed the benefits for la tercera edad and the lack of information of these older people receiving the benefit is outstanding. They don't know why they're receiving the benefit, but they're in line for it, and they're just misinformed. And then my second question is, I've also witnessed the disintegration of the CTM in northern Mexico with the Congress in Mexico City dictating to their membership in the north and the strife that it's caused. And I just wanted to know what Morena is dialoguing with this particular group, the CTM.
CTM.
And Javier, you mind explain what the CTM is?
Okay.
Confederación de Trabajadores Mexicanos.
You can explain them.
El Comité de Trabajadores Mexicanos.
Confederación.
It's like the FML in Mexico. In fact, they partner or have many years.
Yes. Well,
I'm sorry, and the CTM was really an arm of the PRI.
yeah, an arm of the PRI. Okay. About the lack of information, I agree with you again, because it is true. We need to make a more efficient job in informing people about the new things in the government. I have a whole list of good news. What is the government doing so far and the Congress? But I know it because I got that information from the internet. But a lot of people in my country do not have access to internet. A lot of people. That is why many older people are not receiving yet the pension. The universal pension is not that universal as we would like to be. They are isolated. It's hard to believe in 21st century, but It happens all the time in my country. But I see this reality as a process. I mean, we are doing things slowly, maybe, but we are doing things to create a good internet service for all of us. Actually, the government of Mexico has criticized Carlos Slim, the wealthiest person in Mexico, who received as a gift, almost a gift, from Carlos Salinas de Gortari some 30 years ago, Telmex, the company of communications in Mexico, was privatized, and he was the beneficiary of that gift, with the promise that he will develop the enterprise, the Telmex, and give good service and cheap service to everyone in Mexico. That didn't happen. Didn't happen. That didn't happen with Telmex. That didn't happen with the railroad in Mexico. Was privatized. As a result of privatization, it has been dismantled. We don't have we don't have railroad in Mexico. Is necessary? Yes, it is necessary because it was a system, precarious, but it existed, and it gave service to many people. The service was cheap, massive, which is very important in a country with those inequalities in Mexico. So, yes, we we need a better system of for communicating people their benefits or to make possible their participation. Because if they are excluded, isolated, so far, how they can be part of the change? How can be part of the community? They continue to be excluded. You are right, absolutely, sir. And I think from the very beginning, we noticed that press conference in the morning of AMLO is not enough. It's not enough. We need a system of a very efficient and richer system of information of all those things. Not only the good news about the government, of information in general. In general, it is very important. Yes, I accept that. And the second question was, excuse me, I'm old already.
The CTM.
CTM, yes.
Since AMLO came into power.
Well,
And the divisiveness that they have done with their own membership. That's
yes. Well, what is happening in Mexico about unions and confederations of unions is that we finally adopted the Convention of 1949 of the International Organization of Labor that makes possible for unions to create mechanisms, anti-corruption mechanisms, for be defended from employer and employers' organization to infiltrate the unions and corrupt them from inside. So maybe that is one of the reasons that unions in Mexico in general are beginning their inner transformation with new tools, legal tools for, expel the corruption from them. The CTM, Confederación de Trabajadores de México, was like a corporation, like a confederation of unions, very close linked to the PRI, the most corrupt party in Mexico's history. So the CTM was intended to be a big labor movement in Mexico, but actually from its creation, it became a manipulated movement, manipulated confederation. I don't know in particular what happened in the north part of Mexico with the CTM, but I see as a possibility the fact that it could be like a cleaning process from the inside. But I really need more information about that. I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
Yeah, my name is Charles Minster. I'm a supporter of the Spartacist League of the United States and the Spartacist Group of Mexico, which are Marxist-Leninist organizations that advocate for a workers' government. Now, you talk about corruption.
Yes.
Capitalism is the system that's created the greatest corruption in human history.
Yes.
So we can't allow capitalism to continue, or we're going to have corruption no matter where you look. The CTM and the rest of the trade unions are under government control. The government can control their dues, can control who gets elected, controls the membership by laws that the PRI instituted. What does AMLO say about that? NAFTA. I got here late, so I might have missed it. NAFTA, the capitalist creation that devastated the peasantry of Mexico. It's forced, 5 million to immigrate? Maybe more. And how many did it kill? And how, with all the devastation, we have the drug cartels killing thousands. What does AMLO say about NAFTA? They're cooperating with Trump with NAFTA. Abortion, feminism you talk about. Well, the feminist cry is for abortion, free abortion. It should be free abortion on demand. But you're pandering to the Catholic Church, which in a plebiscite, which I understand AMLO is calling for, the Catholic Church will use every resource they have to defeat lifting restrictions on abortion. So I see many contradictions in your policies.
Oh yes, absolutely. I do not pretend to have the truth, but I also think that if my thoughts were like yours, I wouldn't do anything, and my people will be doing anything, because we will see that corruption is absolute and there is nothing to do. If I was a conservator and my thoughts were more or less like yours, so Morena didn't exist, me and my people, who voted AMLO, who are changing things slowly from the inside. If we were conservators too, we didn't do anything so far. If we are doing something, at least, it's because we think otherwise. We think differently. I don't think, and we don't think, that the government, that the present government has the control of the CTM, of the unions. I would think like that if I believed that AMLO is the same as Salinas de Gortari. Yeah? So that I think that as well as I could be mistaken, I hope that you are mistaken.
I don't believe so.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Congratulations.
I just had a comment.
I think we're getting time, aren't we?
Just spoke. I mean,
Yeah,
you know,
can you?
Well, I know you're speaking about the Catholic Church, and as an institution, yeah, we all know they're corrupt and stuff, but the people who belong to the Catholic Church or have this belief in God, you know, I mean, we can't get down on those people. You know, I agree with you and, and letting that go, that, even though we're leftists, we can believe in God or higher spirit, those of us who are American Indian and stuff. And, I just had to comment on that because we all know that as an institution, these religions are corrupt, but people that belong to it are not.
Thank you. Okay, that's it.
Oh, one more.
I wanted to know, I know there was a lot of talk when Obrador got elected, and people were excited that maybe that would bring change to Mexico. Obviously, you talked a lot about the corruption that goes on there. I was just wondering, generally speaking, as a leftist in Mexico, what you think of Obrador and what kinds of things he's done since he's been in office.
Okay, if I understood the question.
I know, I talk very fast, I'm sorry, yeah.
Okay, what I do think about him?
Yeah, what do you think? I read things in the newspaper, but I don't trust I don't trust American media's coverage
Okay.
of Mexico. So I just wanted to know, like, what is the word on the ground, word on the street, as we would say, about Obrador? What do we think of? What do you
Well,
think
there are places where people love him, as in Tabasco, the state where he was born. And there are places where people hate him. For example, in the state of Guanajuato, where I work in, many people, it's one of the most conservative states in Mexico. And it's the only state where during the presidential election, he didn't win in the state of Guanajuato. I'm ashamed of it. But it's true, it's the only state. All was this color, how do you call this color?
Red? Red.
Maroon?
Maroon, yeah, maroon.
All the country was maroon, but Guanajuato.
Wow.
That's not only because AMLO or the conservative people of Guanajuato, but also because of our leaders in Morena, Guanajuato. But in general, I would say that, let me ask you this way.
Yeah.
When, before we became to the government or the majority in the Congress, we were already creating a new national list for social programs. And people, we were knocking at the doors, such as the Jehovah's Witnesses, speaking about social programs of the future. Before the election, and people said, someone could slam the door on my nose. It happened very often, very, very often. I understand that because I know that people think in different ways. But now, when they know that it's a reality that social programs are already working, people are already receiving their small money, but money. Attitude has been changing, has changed a lot. And, well, I am not that naive. I am naive, not too much. But people actually understand the meaning, the deep meaning of some acts of the president. For example, when he says, well, former presidents used to earn 500,000 pesos a month. I will receive only 100. That is, 20% of people kind of understood that. I will not live in Los Pinos, the presidential residence, a huge system of palaces. He rejected that. Now it's a museum, a cultural center with a museum and so on and so on. Some things like he disappeared the so-called Estado Mayor, like the secret service for the president. 5,000 people taking care of one person, the president, with all the privileges. They were like a mafia,
Right.
very aggressive. And now Estado Mayor, the Secret Service, is zero. It doesn't exist anymore. People like are understanding that this could be a different government, different government. Besides that, the very the Congress, they lowered their income, their salary, to less than 50%. And all the privileges of diputados and senators were eliminated. They received a lot of money every year for their productivity. But now they just receive their salary. That is why we gave them a temporary power to do things in benefit of the community, not for getting rich. They had cars, brand new cars, every period, every year they changed. Cell phones and a lot of assistants, each diputado, each senator. Now they have nothing. I mean, a couple of assistants and that's it.
Yeah.
No cars, no insurance.
Right.
They only have Seguro Social, or ISSSTE is the, the social, the medical care general, national, and that, things like that. And many other things. The social programs is like the most visible part because it is touches a lot of people, millions of people as beneficiaries of those programs. So my view on AMLO, I made a couple of criticisms about him, about his lack of political formation, and so on and so on. But mainly, my opinion about him is based on what he has been doing, in facts, in information, not in prejudices. That's what I think.
Thank you.
I'm going to make a suggestion that we take one or maybe two brief questions as we wrap. And then begin to wrap this up. I know there are a couple of people who are going to be making announcements about some things that are going on in the city, in the Bay Area. So why don't we take one? Yeah, why don't you come forward? Great.
I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the prison system. Has it been any reform, and do you have any privatized prisons like
Yes.
we do in this country?
Yes, I would begin the answer explaining that a very famous prison in Mexico just disappeared. It was turned into a natural reserve and a center for research about sea resources.
Lecumberri?
No, Las Islas Marías,
Ah.
the Maria Islands in Mexico. It's in the Pacific. A prison in a system of islands. Now it's a natural reserve and research center. And no, we don't have any private prison because we cannot, taking this phenomenon, the prisons, as a business is not the way we think about that. It's not a way of re-educate prisoners, people who are paying for some crimes, we believe in other kind of politics. In that is a logic, a modern capitalist logic that the market can eat all. Some kind of invisible hand that puts things in order and is like a source of justice. No, we don't believe in that modern capitalist, individualistic, and domination speech. So all our prisons are state prisons, and the National Guard is actually now entering those prisons because they were controlled by police, the corrupt police, and there are mafias inside the prisons in Mexico. That is a fact. From the prisons, we received sometimes phone calls trying to extort us from the prisons. There are whole mafias. And you know, because it has been allowed it to function like that. So it's very complicated. I don't think we are gonna see a big change in that area too soon. But I do believe that with the help of the National Guard, things could start to change. Start just to change. I don't see in our present government any project about that. I don't see it. Maybe I have missed something. I don't see any new thing except for the National Guard. But actually, yes, we should have been working on that project. I say we, but it's they, okay? The government or our Congress, not we, the base militants, of course. That's my opinion. Yeah.
My question is about Pemex, which is the Mexican oil company. And I understand, of course, with the past way the government's been run, it's not run very well, and therefore it's in a great deal of trouble. But when we were fighting the Dakota XL pipeline here from the tar sands in Canada, I heard that the crude oil from Mexico, some of it or all of it, is shipped to Texas or Louisiana to a coke refinery and then shipped back to Mexico because refineries are expensive. So that means Mexico would have to have the capacity to build and maintain its own
Yes.
refineries. So do you know what's happening with Pemex?
Yes, Pemex is one of the biggest oil companies in Latin America. It's a state company, but very corrupted. Not corrupt, but corrupted by the recent governments. For example, it was almost all of its refineries have been almost dismantled in order to privatize them. Because if they don't work properly, well, maybe the private initiative could help us a little bit. And that is the way that, actually, I see it as an infiltration to corrupt from within Pemex. Pemex was created as the state petrol industry in Mexico to solve many problems of social development. Because it was a time after the Mexican Revolution where almost all the country was destroyed by a civil war. It was actually a civil war that lasted decades, actually. And one of the phases of that civil war was the Mexican Revolution, but all 19th century is, civil war in Mexico. So it was created to for the government to acquire some funds for financing schools, hospitals, roads, railroads, and so on and so on. But recently, some 30 years ago, Carlos Salinas de Gortari, president of Mexico, dismantled or began to dismantle also Pemex. For example, by contracting some contractors, you use that term? Contractors create large pipes of oil that are not being used today. But by contract, Mexican government has to pay as if they were they were being used right now because it lays in the contract. All of them were built by friends, but someone's friends, because that system of corruption implied all that. Many oil pipes are without any activity, but Mexican government has to pay billions of pesos every year for that. So that diminished the financial potential of Pemex. Also, the lack of refineries, of enough quantity of refineries. That is why we depend on US refineries to have gasoline, for example. More than 50% of our gasolines are American. Calderon, Felipe Calderon, 2 administrations before, Presidente Felipe Calderon promised that he will build a new refinery in Hidalgo, but he built only one big wall for some billions of pesos, only the wall. Now we are in the process of building a new refinery in Tabasco, in Dos Bocas, Tabasco, in order to depend not so hard from the United States. The idea is that during the government of López Obrador, 3 refineries will be built. The first one in Dos Bocas, so that we could achieve the autonomy in fuel. That is one question. The other is not about Pemex, but CONACYT is the Center for Financing Research in Mexico, together with Semarnat, the Secretaría de Medio Ambiente. Is that understood? Medio Ambiente, Environment. The Secretary of Environment are working in one line of research about new energies, clean energies, because we know that petroleum is, we are about some 20 years or maybe 30 years of using oil, and that's it, that will be it. Well, it's not renewable, right? So we are working on that, on new energies, clean energies, but now we have to do what is possible to do. You know, you remember the word factibility? Now it's fossil fuel, is what it is right now, but already exists. A whole industry, lots of cars that need to be fed with that kind of fuel is horrible, because pollution and so on and so on, but it's the way it is right now. So I think, I want to believe that in 6 years we will have 3 more refineries and be self-sufficient in terms of production of gasoline, but who knows?
I would like to ask you about the Tratado Bucareli, el Tratado Bucareli in Mexico, and the training stopped Mexico to build technology for many years. And I'm excited because that agreement is going to be over in, I think, 2021. But I would like to know what is the project for the government to start create a Mexican technology, because USA stopped Mexico to create their own technology.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear about that.
Yeah, well, I actually do not anything about the Treaty of Bucareli, but what I know is that our economic powers have been not interested in develop our own technology, because we have in Mexico a very, how can I say, not very nationalist business class. Business class, is that right? No, that's for planes, right? Okay. Our business people in Mexico are more interested in buying technology because it's their personal business, not in developing our own infrastructure for technology and so on and so on. That is a reality, and that explains our being decades behind United States or Japan or other countries that are creating technology. It's not, I don't think that any program of the government could compensate that lack of development in technology. Maybe a program like that is very necessary, but decades of not doing the right thing are very hard to compensate for a program. But yes, I do actually need more information about this treaty.
This is very important point because the treatment they signed it like 70 years ago, and the agreement was like that the United States said to Mexican government they can build anything like any kind of technology, and Mexico can how do you say it? Put together all the piece for anything, but he can put his own technology in the pieces. Like for example, for TVs, Mexico is the number one. They put all the pieces together and TV, but they don't create that technology.
Yeah.
Technologies came from the other countries.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, same for for communication, same for aeronautic,
Yes.
many things.
Well, yes, that is also because of the dynamics of capitalism. They have divided the world into areas dedicated to a couple of tasks and nothing more. And some other areas provide the raw materials and so on and so on. They decide almost everything. That is why I think that a program for do things in a new way, creating our new technology is indispensable, such a program, but this lack of development is also a product of the decisions of global powers, And fighting against a global power is a task that one single government in 6 years of its period will not change radically. It could begin kind of change, but not radically. Being realist, I would think like that. Sorry. Oh, my friend already went home. My friend from
Well, maybe just a few closing words. I would just like to say that, there's so much that can be said about what Javier was just describing about the situation in Mexico and with Morena and its history and struggles and even conflicts. And talking about oil, for example. The history of oil in Mexico is fascinating. And going back to 1938 when Lázaro Cárdenas nationalized the oil industry and took it away from British Petroleum and Standard Oil. It almost started another war. Maybe that might have been a 15th invasion by the United States into Mexico. But anyway, what I hear really from Javier is just really a sense of real pride and possibility. That what's happened with this election is just tremendous, unheard of. We didn't expect it. I've lived decades of my own life in Mexico and seen horrible things. In fact, I was thrown out of the country in 1995 when I was accused of being a Zapatista. Right? Well, I think that, taking... I just think that what to do now is to really take a lot of what Javier was describing and from the questions that wonderful people have asked and really think about now what to do now, here, in the city, in California, in the United States. And one of the reasons why we're doing these events in the four cities in Boston, here, San Diego, and Los Angeles, is because several of us from Liberation Road and some other people said, look, really what's happening in Mexico is so important that really what we should be thinking about is not just trying to understand what's happening in Mexico, but actually to build some kind of an initiative, a formation to support the people's movements in Mexico. And we've actually written out a proposal and want to invite people to take copies of this proposal for a solidarity project with the people of Mexico. We have it in both languages there. And to contact us, the main national coordinator of this project, Gabriel Mireles, out in Boston actually. He will answer you. Also, we also urge you, if you're ever able, to come to Mexico and check out what's going on with the social movements, with Morena, because it's really, the situation now has changed. It's incredible. It really is pretty incredible what's going on in the country. At the same time, there's some very difficult issues that Morena, as a party, is dealing with. And people are asking, well, really what has changed? A tremendous amount has changed in the country. At the same time, there are real serious problems, some that will take years. It won't just take the 6 years of I'm living in the presidency. It will take a long, long time to deal with. So that's really all I wanted to say. I urge you to take a look at the table there. And yeah.
Well, about this, we are very interested in Morena, in Mexico, to keep close to social movements, because social movements are like the moral reserve of our people. They are capable to resume, to express the very core of the popular causes. When a social movement speaks with power, it needs like a petition, something where they have the very, how can I say it in English, the essence of the cause they are fighting for, written in a piece of paper. We have to listen to them because they are everywhere. I told you at the beginning of my participation here that we have hundreds of social conflicts in Mexico right now. Hundreds, at least 600 of social conflicts for water, for land, for against corruption, and so on and so on.
Against rape, violaciones.
Yes. And what is the warranty that governments won't become corrupt? I think the only possibility is to keep close to the people. And I would say that the best part of the people is the political community participating in social movements, for example. So when I was explaining this scheme, I was thinking in a book by Enrique Dussel. It's called 20 Theses of Politics. In that book, Dussel explains how important it is for a government to keep close to the social movements. That is not an absolute possibility, but it keeps the government under the sight, under the supervision of the people, but mainly, most important of all, that we could hear the people's hearts. They are beating for concrete causes. We have to keep close to them. So that is why we're very interested in getting close to those causes, but those causes are the same here in the United States, for water, for social justice, for rights for the immigrants, for women, and so on, for indigenous peoples in my country. So we have like a reflection here, the same causes, because those are popular causes. If we articulate somehow those struggles and movements, we won't be stopped. That is why, for us, it's very important. And this project about the solidarity with Mexico, the people of Mexico, is like the stone, how can I say, there is an expression in Spanish, but the beginning, maybe, for that articulation of social movements and struggles in Mexico and the United States. Thank you.